All right, I'm going to call the April 26th meeting of the Ad Hoc Parking Committee to order. Bob and I are here in the room. Rob McGreevy isn't able to attend today, so it's the two of us, and Samantha is here with us, and Michelle is on Zoom. First item is to approve the April 12th minutes. Can I get a motion to approve those?
I move that we approve the 12 minutes.
Thank you. All those in favor?
I'm in favor.
Obviously, yes. Thank you. Okay. So the next section is discussion on parking. Is there an update on the Park Mobile implementation? I know at our last meeting, Michelle said that they're working on getting the stickers and then material, educational material and all that stuff. And I saw there was a little blurb about it in the newsletter last time. So I was like, woo, this is exciting. It's almost here.
Yeah, we're getting there. So Park Mobile has asked for, the exact number of stickers and signs they need to send us. So Public Works has been putting together that information for them. I expect that to be done by the end of this week. And I was told by Park Mobile, once they have that number confirmed and can ship out our stickers and signs, it'll take about 3 weeks to get the system up and running. So, if everything is according to plan, if by the end of this week, we're on the 3-week countdown, then by the end of May, we would have Park Mobile up and going. And my thanks to Michelle and Missy for working to get, starting to get some public information out there about the rollout. And and then Michelle's going to work with Park Mobile to integrate the UP safety for the parking tickets with Park Mobile, but it should be by the end of May. Everything should be ready to go with that.
Super. This is very exciting. And one of those things that people have asked for off and on for a long time. And so it's great to finally have it come to fruition. So my thanks to everybody on the staff who helped make this happen. It's not something any of us can make happen, so thanks. The municipal parking lot draft ordinance. Samantha and I had a conversation with Solicitor Walco after our meeting on April 12th and gave him the comments of the committee, places where things needed to be tightened up a little bit. And just due to a lot of other things, he didn't have a chance to get it to us to review until Friday late afternoon. So I took a look at it over the weekend and wanted to follow up with him on Monday because there were some things that I thought, well, it's kind of not what we had talked about, but maybe because of the way it fits into the whole ordinance and stuff. Anyway, he found through that conversation there were more edits to be made, and he sent that around. He sent that to me and Samantha late last night. So to me it looks like what we wanted, with just a couple of questions that I thought, Samantha, you and I could handle offline, get back to John, and if there's any little tweak that needs to be made, if that could be done, and then it could be come before council on the 5th to consider to advertise the ordinance. So that was my thoughts on that. I wanted to know what you and Bob think.
Yeah, I think that sounds great, Barbara.
Okay. Yeah. So then, if council approves the advertisement on May 5th, would it then come before us at the May business meeting to adopt, or how?
No, that'd be a little too
tough. What I was thinking.
Because you have to have at least 7 days in the advertise ordinance,
Okay.
and then it takes a little bit of time for the paper to actually run the ad.
Yeah.
So you'd probably be looking at actual. If council were in favor of advertising, you'd be looking at actual adoption. Well, I don't know. We might have to see if we can get it done for the May business meeting, because council isn't going to have, traditionally, council hasn't had a June work session, correct? Or
No, it's July, August, and September.
Okay. Well, in that case, then at the June work session, then council would adopt it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it's the only way I can remember that is it's July, August, and it's September because Labor Day.
That's right.
That first week of September is always an iffy. People are away, so confusing. Okay, all right. So great big. So the next thing is to talk about residential parking and where we are in our decisions on that, so that we can be in a place to have a presentation at the May 5th workshop meeting of just what are a big picture of what we're recommending at this point for council to consider. This is for council to think about, and whether they decide to do this or make changes to it is still later. So there were a couple of things that I wanted to highlight, and then some questions that I was hoping we could talk about today, just to kind of wrap up some of the things we've been working on. I revamped a little bit the working document that we've been working through, describing what our preliminary decisions are, so that we don't lose track of them. And when I was doing that, and in a conversation that I had, that Samantha and I had recently, was this. When we go to phase 2, where we would say that if you want to, throughout the borough, if you wanted to park your car on the street, you now need a permit to park overnight. If you wanted to park overnight, not park during the day, but anywhere, if you want to park overnight, you need a permit as a way to both equitably share the cost of having on-street parking, but also also address the issue of people who don't even live in the borough, who park their car here for a week or two while they go away on vacation, taking the train to the airport or something. So we're trying to address those concerns. I said, what would be the enforcement mechanism for that? And we talked about that and said, well, enforcement would, we need to kind of define what overnight means, because, if you have a party and people at your house till midnight, that's not overnight parking. But, so what does that mean? And I think, Samantha, you said that you've seen other places use like 1 to 5 a.m. as the definition of what overnight parking is.
That's correct.
Okay, so we were thinking we could do something like that, and so that would mean that our parking controllers would have to periodically have a shift that starts at like 4 in the morning, so they could randomly sort of see where do we have non-compliance with that. Bob, does that sound like a good plan to you? Do you see any concerns with that?
That makes sense, and I think maybe we would ask parking controllers sort of for maybe, or the chief for some idea of what's a reasonable enforcement schedule, because it certainly doesn't need to be done every day.
Yeah.
Maybe not even every week, but
yeah,
maybe it's done in some kind of random way or something periodically.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I even wonder if is it something that's fair to ask officers to do, say if they just notice things. In other words, it's just a part of the ordinance, but only is enforced when there's concerns expressed by residents, something like that, and then it can be done by a call to the police. If that's a reason, I just wonder if that's a reasonable expectation.
That's a good thought, and especially if they're already out, working a night shift and already out patrolling and all that.
Yeah, and it's like, in a certain way, the ordinance is about providing residents a mechanism where they can say report an abandoned car, or
Well,
it becomes more obvious where the issue is too.
Yeah, but I think that even without, I don't think you have to put that in the ordinance. I think what the ordinance does is it gives the borough the right to then say, no, you're parked illegally.
Yeah.
So if a resident does report something, we now have, with this ordinance, the borough would have the ability to enforce, take action against that person and say, hey, you need to have a permit if you want to park on the street overnight. And I don't know that the ordinance doesn't have to spell out enforcement hours or anything like that, does it?
No, the ordinance would need to spell out what overnight parking means.
Okay.
But
it wouldn't have to spell out when we're enforcing it or any of that. So
no, that would be up to the chief's discretion on how to best enforce the ordinance.
Like an administrative practice. So, okay. So I think when, talking about this with council, I want to be able to make clear what needs to be in the ordinance and what will be an administrative kind of decision that council doesn't really have to weigh in on.
Sure.
Unless they have some thoughts about it, but it's not like, oh, you have to then vote on that or something.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is administrative. This is ordinance. Okay.
So enforcement policy
Yeah,
will to be determined
yeah.
by the department, by the police department.
Yeah, I would say so, yeah.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, and certainly if there's, I mean, like anything, if there's a concern that council has with what they've decided, there's ways to provide input on that, but it's not like it's something that we have to then put into law, which wouldn't make sense anyway. So then that got me to thinking about, okay, so so I think about my block, which is the 400 block of Conway, which is not a currently regulated street, no 2-hour zones there. So if council does agree that down the road we want to do this, no overnight parking without a permit on blocks like mine, if I have a guest who's staying overnight and I want them to be able to park on the street, then I have to get a guest pass for them. Which right now, I never have to get a guest pass for anybody because, again, there's no 2-hour regulated zone on my block. So my question about that was just, would the price for the guest pass be the same? I don't know why it should be different, but I thought we talked about guest passes, I think when we were thinking and what the price would be for those when we're looking at the 2-hour zones, and kind of had that, at least in my mind, that's where I was when we were talking about that. But now I'm just like, okay, would we keep the same price for places that right now don't have a 2-hour zone, but will eventually, if council adopts this, have the overnight parking permit requirement? And that, just as a reminder, we were saying guest pass would be $5 for a daily pass and $15 for a weekly pass. So just wanted a one-time guest pass, which I guess if you're parking overnight, that would just entitle you to one kind of 24-hour period in a sense. But then if you wanted more than that, you would pay $15. If you wanted a whole week, if you wanted 2, you'd pay $10. Do we like that? Would we keep that same pricing structure?
I just don't know. I'm thinking about, gosh, it's not uncommon for someone to have an overnight guest. So they're parking on the street. Could it just be, could it be when they're not in a 2-hour regulated zone, it's really just a paper permit that doesn't have a fee associated with it? I mean, how much does it actually cost us administratively for someone to log on and obtain a permit? And so like they're obtaining a guest permit for a non-regulated portion of the borough, and it's just like, say, a 0 fee. Although, on the other hand, then maybe you get that kind of abuse again.
That's what I was going to say. Does that defeat the point of the overnight parking permit?
Doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. And it also creates an inequity.
Yeah, it does. Could we, so we're making a recommendation. Could we just make a recommendation that there would be a fee, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to borough-wide enforcement? In other words, we're sort of trying to solve a problem that we don't yet have. We're not ready to cross that bridge yet. We're still going to determine if this policy works.
Well,
so we know that there will be a fee associated with the parking, but I'm asking if we can kick the can.
well, but I guess my question would be, why not just say? Because for the moment, we are also recommending that when we do go to the overnight, if we go to requiring a permit to park overnight on the street, on streets that aren't currently regulated, we're saying we would use the same fee structure that we're proposing for folks who currently live in a 2-hour zone. Why can't we just, if
it costs money to have a car, I guess it costs money to the borough to store cars. Yeah, we could just say it's the same fee structure and see how council and public respond to that. I guess I'm just being,
I'm looking for,
I'm waffling, but I think it's the right thing to do.
I mean, I'm looking for consistency, so I'm also open to saying, hey, we're not sure yet whether the price should be the same for overnight parking stickers, but or overnight parking permits. I'm trying to stop using the word stickers. Because again, if we have a lower price for people who live somewhere that's not a 2-hour zone, we're saying, oh, your parking is less valuable than, or the on-street space is less valuable than it is where we currently have 2-hour zones.
In some ways it is.
Yeah,
because it's more peripheral, and I think I hope we're designing a parking system that places a premium on the places where people, where there's demand.
Well, that, but also we wanted to place a premium where there's supply too, so that if you've got a driveway, we'd like to incent you to park in it.
Right. The driveway is different than, say,
Yeah.
copious on-street parking. I'm just imagining, like, say, somebody leaving an automobile out on Windale overnight where there's hundreds of spaces and there's 2 overnight cars and they're paying sort of standard rate. Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably what we have to do.
Well, I think
it's probably what most municipalities do when they want to put their parking.
Right, exactly. So I think,
is that true, Manager Bryant, that like when municipalities regulate their overnight parking, they have a permit fee?
So,
permit fee.
so I'll admit I'm only not really personally familiar with Shell Pump Parade, and I actually don't think they even allow for like this guest idea. I'm just gonna look on their website.
So they may not even allow overnight parking at all.
Right, I think I don't think they allow overnight parking anymore.
I'm thinking about a kid who goes to visit their friend and stays overnight,
oh, there are all kinds of scenarios.
There's so many scenarios.
Yes, and so
it's the health aide who comes in the night.
Yeah. There's all kinds of scenarios we can come up with. And so if we're wanting to do something, we're not going to be able to address every single one of those. It's just not, and still have a policy. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I've had a few minutes to think about it. I'm very comfortable with the fee, Barbara. Yeah. I'm officially no longer waffling on this. I'm clear that it's the right thing to do.
Okay.
Okay?
Yes, okay. That's fair. All right.
I think there's a difference between waffling and thinking something through.
Yes.
It's early in the morning still.
Totally understand.
I'm waking up, and I think it's I think it's congruent with all of the conversations we've had about the true value of parking.
Yeah. That's
throughout our meeting, throughout our 9 months of meeting.
Yes.
Okay.
That's kind of what I think too. And and really, again, we're putting something together for council to react to. This is not, we're not saying, oh, this is what must be done, but this is, and because who knows, council as a body may not agree that they want to have, that there's a value to on-street parking that we should be capturing, so we don't know.
I think it's important that we take that sort of vanguard position. If council doesn't agree, then they don't.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. So, I mean, I think the reason.
Sorry to put you on the spot about
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
No, I'd rather you ask and wonder.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and we're at this place because the work that has been done so far by the traffic study and the traffic study task force did not have here's a recommended policy for you, council, to react to. And that's really what we're doing, is coming up with something that where we've thought through a lot of the issues. And so now, council can then say, oh, well, we like this, but we want to change the fee structure, or we like the fee structure, whatever. But it's like, there just needed to be something that council can react to, so I feel like I think we're in a good place with that.
Thanks.
You're welcome. The other thing that I just said it because I was saying I'm trying to stop using the word stickers because and that's the other thing I was like, oh, I need to get that in this summary that we're going to, when we present this to council, we want to make sure everybody understands this. This program will not have stickers. It's going to be based on license plate readers. And so the concern that people have about, I don't want to attach a sticker to my car, will go away, which is wonderful. I mean, I don't like attaching stickers to my car either, so I totally get it. So, but I thought, ooh, we need to highlight that, because we just take it as for granted in the committee, and I'm like, yeah, we need to talk about that.
And I think it's all, just since you're making that clear, to also say, guest permits won't utilize stickers or hang tags or barcodes or anything of that nature that uses the license plate.
Right.
So just...
Yeah, it's for all permits.
Just in talking with people, they say, like, well, we're going to give each household a hang tag.
Yeah.
It's not that complicated.
No, it's not that complicated. Yeah, it's very easy to apply for guest pass online. It's easy to come into the office to apply for them. So, yeah. Okay. Thank you. So, I don't think we have to have this figured out before we present to council, but we talked about this at the last meeting, and I know that Michelle Carroll said she would think about this and come back to us with thoughts at some point, and that was, how would you recommend the rollout be staggered? Like, when we first start with the switching from the stickers to the license plate reader for the folks that have currently regulated streets. If you had some suggestions now, if you think that's something that we should be talking about at the May 5th meeting, if not, we can defer that conversation to a future meeting if you want. So.
I'll defer to Michelle on that. I will note she's on Zoom right now because we have a staff member out today, so Michelle's keeping an eye on the office for us while participating in this meeting.
Ooh, that's not easy.
No, so I'm really grateful to Michelle for doing that this morning. So Michelle, if you're by your computer right now and have any question.
Yeah, so I thought about it, and I think Barbara at the last meeting, or maybe it was Bob, brought up maybe we could do it alphabetical order. And looking at our list of all the 2-hour zones, I think that would work.
Alphabetical order by street?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And what are you thinking? Like, how many? I'm guessing it would be like X number of streets this month, X number the next month, kind of thing. Is that what you're thinking, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think we could do it in like 3 kind of sets, and then just separate them, like, say Chestnut through Hampton expires January 1st. Iona between North Narberth expires April 1st. And then, and keep going and just do it in 3 groups. So it's not too complex. But then a whole street would be expiring at the same time.
That makes sense. And so how long would are you thinking the initial rollout would take? So, when you're doing the first set, how much time do you want for each set to handle them? Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense? That question makes sense?
How much time between each zone? Or
yeah, so if you're saying, okay, we're going to take care of Chestnut to Essex first, and so are you wanting people on those streets to come in and apply in, say, a month, within 4 weeks, or do you know what I'm asking?
Oh, when we initially roll out the new permits?
Sorry, yes, for the initial rollout.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, 4 weeks would be great, as much time as possible. I know that when the police department started enforcing 2-hour zones again recently, we did have a large amount of people stop by the office, call with email with questions. So there was some confusion. And I think that since this permitting process will be different than it has been, I think a month advance for the initial rollout would be a good time frame.
Okay, if I'm hearing you correctly, I think that would mean that after 3 months, it would be fully rolled out. Because if you're doing 3 sets of street clumps, street groupings, let's get it that way, and they each have 4 weeks for people to apply in, then it would be fully rolled out after 3 months. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Yeah, I mean, I think we could do it that way or throughout the year. Like I said, pick January, April, and October, say. And so there's, we could separate it that way or have everyone, like you said, if you're expiring in January, the next will be expiring in February and March to get it out of the way. I don't know if Manager Bryant has any thoughts on that.
No. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think, Michelle, maybe if I can try to reword what Barbara's saying. So I think what you're suggesting of I forget the right word for it, it's not quarterly, but the 3 times a year thing with the 3 groupings. I think once the program is going, that sounds, I think, really fantastic to everyone here. So thank you for that suggestion. I think what Barbara is asking is prior to that period, so let's just say, hypothetically, if council, I'm just making up a date here, I do not have a crystal ball. Let's say if council in August passed an ordinance that would create this system, would we be waiting until January and follow that sort of street schedule, or would we say something like, okay, council's passed this ordinance now, everyone needs to get into compliance with it, and then we'll do, the 3 times a year kind of thing. What are your thoughts on that? Or I might offer on, my perspective, given the likely time frame we're talking about before council passes an ordinance, we might just say we're just going to wait until those time periods that Michelle mentioned. But I'm sorry, Michelle, your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, I think that, if, say, this is passed in August, I think that it'll be hard to ask for someone to pay for a full year if their permit expires in January. I think I would prefer to wait until that point, if that makes sense.
Does to me.
Yeah. Okay. So when could we say the first phase was fully rolled out?
Well, in that case, then it would take well, then that depends on what Michelle suggested before. Do you want to do it where the month of January is one group, the month of February is one group, and the group in March is one group, and then you're done with it for the rest of the year? Or do you want to say, January is the first group, May is the second group, and September, October is the third group?
I think that really would depend on the flow of your work.
Yeah, I was going to say, how about
Maybe
you guys?
Michelle, Carol would figure that out, because you kind of have a 12-month flow of work and different things that happen at different times.
Yeah.
You don't want it to interfere with your budgeting season or your other, your auditing season or whatever. For example, I don't know what all. I think there's intensive times probably for Michelle, Carol. So
yeah, my general observation, having been here for almost a year now, and having worked in other towns and seeing the workflow, I certainly want Michelle's thoughts on this, but to me the first 3 months of the year seem like kind of the busiest time of the year. And then we do have to do the budget near the end of the year, but at the beginning of the year there's a bunch of regulatory stuff that has to be done, the audit has to be done. There's a number of other annual sort of things that then come into play at the beginning of the year. So again, Michelle, you're also the person who's really going to be responsible for dealing with it, you and Missy. So I especially welcome your thoughts, but to me, the idea of spreading it out through the year sounds more attractive than trying to do it all at once at the first 3 months of the year.
So could I maybe offer this, is that, that someone other than Bob or me write this up in a way that then, you're like, okay, this is what we want, what we suggest that we do, and we can do that.
So why don't we offer this then? Michelle, if you could by like Thursday or Friday, if you could send Barbara like something written about your thoughts on how that timing would work.
Yes, of course.
That'd be great. And then I can, as much as I feel like it needs to be mentioned to council, it can be included in the presentation on the 5th. Okay, perfect, because I don't want to mistake any of that, because it's...
So in the minutes I'm writing, there will be 3 groups. So the full rollout will take a full cycle of length that Michelle Carroll will identify for the committee.
Sure, that's perfect.
That's perfect.
That's perfect. Okay. So as I went through where we are in, in other things to talk about, and said, what might there be things that we would want to talk about before the May 5th presentation? There's some little details around guest passes, like do we want to limit the number and things like that, and I thought, well, I don't think those have to be, we don't have to have those fully baked yet for this. I mean, the purpose of this meeting is, the presentation on the 5th is really to just to let council know what are some of these big decisions that were big suggestions we've developed, because they're not, as again, I keep wanting to stress, these are just recommendations that we've come up with based on all of the information that we've looked at and the public comments that we've received. Knowing that we still have some more work to do, and certainly we haven't even addressed commercial parking yet, and we want to get that done before we would even do a full change in anything. But the other thing that I thought we haven't talked about a lot, and it might come up, I'm not sure though, that we'll be able to get through all of the ins and outs of these today, but I thought we should at least start, is this, what is, when we've talked about having the new parking, residential parking program, we're mostly thinking about single-family homes, twins, maybe, a dwelling that has 3 or 4 units in it, one of the great big old Victorians that was converted into apartments. We've always kind of talked separately about a multifamily dwelling that I think in our minds was like one of those big ones, that has 20, 30, 40 apartments in it. And, what are the rules for them? And, when I started looking at some of this and thinking some more about some of the details, I thought, we haven't even really defined what we mean when we talk about multifamily. I mean, Nelson Nygaard suggested that would be a dwelling that has 6 or more units in it. That's if we even, or do we even need to define it? I don't know, because we may not. I mean, the reason they defined that was because they, in their study, said that one way you could address parking for those people is if they had no off-street parking available at their apartment building, that they could be allowed to park for free in a municipal lot as long as that municipal lot was underutilized. And that would be for their first permit. And then if they wanted a second permit, they would be charged the same as anybody else, the third, the same, And that was their reason, I think, for even having a definition of what a multifamily dwelling was. And so I almost feel like we don't need to decide how we might define multifamily dwelling until we decide, do we want to do anything different from what we've talked about for a single family home or a twin or whatever. And I don't feel like we've totally gotten there yet.
So multifamily is a term that's defined in the zoning ordinance, and there are parking regulations in the zoning ordinance, parking density regulations.
Yeah.
So I think we want to be careful not to try to create a definition for multifamily, rather create a kind of a parking policy that's based on, like, say, just a parking policy.
Yeah.
So I think we could say, like, buildings that have, anyway, let's just talk about that. Because
Yeah, so I think what you're saying is where I was. I'm not sure we should try to define what we mean by this until we've decided, do we want to do anything different for these kinds of dwellings? So, okay, because I got myself very
I just at first
twisted it when
first pass when you said it, I was thinking, we don't really want to do anything different.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like,
well, and when I saw that the only thing that was really
Yeah.
different in the Nelson Nygaard suggestions was this utilizing a municipal lot for free, I was like, oh, okay, it's not that big of a, so, and that might not be something we even want to do, so then in which case we maybe don't need it. So,
zoning requires a certain amount of parking
Yeah.
per residential unit. And so in a way, if the zoning's not treating a single family different from a multifamily in terms of the number of required parking spaces, maybe what you're saying is sensible.
So I have some questions then about, I was thinking about this, so because we have some of these really large multifamily dwellings some that have off-street parking available. Sometimes it's free, sometimes it's not. You have to pay an extra fee every month. But then we have other ones where there is no off-street parking. Or if there is, it's very limited. Like maybe there's just a driveway that you can park 1 or 2 cars in, like a single-family house. I think with a few exceptions, we don't give those, if those buildings are on a 2-hour zone right now, their address is on a 2-hour zone block, we don't give them unlimited number of on-street permits, right?
Well, I think, and again, I might need Michelle to settle this, but based on the recent concern that I had to address involving one of those units, I just think the way that the 2-hour zones were written was that none of the apartment buildings are included on a 2-hour zones.
Oh, okay.
Which is why none of them get parking permits.
How about Essex Avenue?
Yeah, so there is 300 North Essex Ave that has been receiving permits for at least 10 years that we have on our.
I'm glad Michelle's here.
And maybe Michelle, what about 201?
201 North Essex?
Is that
The corner of Essex and
Windsor?
Windsor.
Essex Manor?
That has not received any parking permits.
Oh, okay. They have a parking lot and they have a parking garage, so that's just curious.
Okay, but when we say this, that none of these multifamily dwellings, other than 300 North Essex, are getting permits because don't abut a 2-hour zone, there's got to be some multifamily dwellings in there. They're just not the really big ones that jump out at us. So do we need to take a look at that and say, are we doing things consistently? Do we have a break point that we're comfortable with, or are we just comfortable with what we have right now? And that's where I don't know enough about the housing stock to know what we've got.
I think that's really tough for me to answer offhand because I don't know. I said because the borough doesn't have a rental registration program yet.
Right.
I don't know offhand how many of those exist, how prevalent they are. I'm trying to think. I think. Well, I'm trying to think. How would this work with the proposed new system? Would it be done by unit? Like, let's say someone lives in a house that's been split into 4 apartments, and that is on a 2-hour zone. and again, Michelle, I might need your help in understanding how this works since I'm not daily involved in it. If like someone's unit 1, like would the whole house be, in terms of like, if we're talking about higher permit fees for each new car, would like unit 1 be its own thing, and unit 2 its own thing, and unit 3 and unit 4 its own thing for that pricing and the number of permits? Or would the entire house be treated as a single entity in terms of first permits this much, second permits this much, da, 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 da?
Isn't it, so just to not, rather than to try to respond directly to your question, because I think it's like it's a big question.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering isn't it convenient that there's only one like large apartment building that's on a 2-hour zone, so we don't have to solve this question?
Well, but she's asking about something that has only like 4 units. And we definitely have some of those.
So,
Yeah, I would agree. I think my position would be, for whatever it's worth, and it's not my job to make policy, but I think the situation doesn't seem broken as far as large apartment buildings go. I mean, some of those residents might think otherwise, but it seems like it's working okay. Yeah, I was thinking more of the smaller.
the smaller, like
Yeah.
the 2, and with the ADU ordinance, we could potentially have that question, say, just like on a single, like on what's currently a single family dwelling. Maybe we should think about it like that for a minute. Let's say, for example, since it's only happened in very limited instances, a single family dwelling now has an ADU, okay? Is the single family and the ADU considered one parcel? Just to ask your question again. Let's think about it, sort of, let's cut it back simple like that. And I tend to think that each unit should be,
See, I don't think it,
I think it should be one entity.
see, and I don't agree with you, because if I live in a 4-unit, old Victorian that's been turned into 4 apartments, I should not have to, if I'm the 4th one to move in, I shouldn't have to pay the 4th permit rate because I moved in later than the other 3 people. I'm not related to any of them, I have no connection to them, that just seems wrong to me.
Yeah, that's probably the easiest way to regulate it too, isn't it?
Yeah,
So
like
like each individual apartment in a multifamily, say under 5,
That's what I was gonna say, it probably needs to be
or like
some
some
Yeah.
cap.
Yeah, I
Well,
just like that.
5 is a natural cap because that's in the zoning.
Is it? Okay.
I
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah, okay. So,
And then do it, this Barbara suggested.
Well, I'd almost say, I mean, should we, given it's the same amount of street frontage, I'm almost wondering, should we just say if you are in a multifamily of 5 or less, we'll do it per unit, but each unit can only have 1 parking permit.
ooh, I like that. Okay, so.
That, I mean, there's a,
That's what we're talking about per
there's
unit.
a sort of a balance about that, but I guess we're gonna have to explain why.
Well, we can start with the suggestion that you can have only 1, and if council says, no, we want to give them 2.
Because somebody might, so just to play devil's advocate for a minute. So let's say it's a 3-unit Victorian, and like the first unit's like a 1,500 square feet, and the second unit's 5, and the third's 5.
Oh, that's true, yeah.
You know, it's like, okay, so you've got a 4-person family living in the big one, and a single person living in each little one.
Yeah, so,
Should the larger unit be able to have more than 1 vehicle or
Well,
one permit?
Well,
maybe,
then they have to
maybe
park
not.
further
I mean,
away.
as long as there's parking available in other portions of the borough that isn't regulated, then what happens when we roll out the overnight?
then everybody's regulated, and so, yeah.
So then a
Becomes a little
person
more-
might not have any place to put a car.
No, they would, there's still gonna be places to park on the street.
Metered spots.
Well, no, they'd have to get a permit, they'd have to get a permit.
Yeah, but they would be, if they were only entitled to 1 permit
Oh, I see.
in a
Well,
multifamily.
we maybe have to say you're only entitled to a permit on, that would be hard, okay, yeah, that gets harder to
I
enforce.
may not be able to solve this
No,
one today.
yeah.
And actually I wanted to, sorry, I didn't have a chance to mention this to you, Bart, this made me think about, something that drives me a little bit insane is the the frontage thing, well, again, I don't know the policy background on why we allow commercial properties to get involved in getting residential parking permits.
I'm not sure either.
I would support the abolishment of that. Or at the very least changing how that works, because there's a frontage thing right now on that where it's like you get one parking permit for every like so many feet of frontage on the street. And I get why you would design it that way for the concern we were just talking about, but to actually enforce that is like a nightmare to deal with.
I agree, and in practical fact, like just to be sort of specific, there's a law firm at the corner of Sabine and North Narberth Avenue, which really, for some reason, they're issued, because of the way the ordinance is written, they're issued parking permits, and it doesn't make sense.
No.
They have a parking lot; it's a commercial business,
Right. Well,
and they do impinge on the neighbors' parking. And so that would be a good reason to repeal it.
I already have that as one of our questions to consider when we get to commercial parking,
Okay.
so it's on the list. We have a lot, and there was actually, so I'm just mindful of time because I want us to have a little bit of time for public comment. So this is what I think I'm going to say about multifamily dwellings, that we still have some questions about that. This is what I'll say at the May 5th meeting. We still have some questions that we want to talk about as a committee around that. And we're also looking at, is there any way that we can incentivize people who have off-street parking available to park there, even if it has a cost for them? And I've been getting I called around to get some data on that, and it's interesting how it varies. So Narberth Hall, which is at 300 North Essex, charges $100 a month, and you don't have to try to put these in here. We'll put these in future minutes. Hampton Manor, which is at Haverford and Iona, has an outside lot that's $60 a month and garage that's $125. You found out from someone, but I'm still waiting to have confirmation from the place that Essex Manor at Essex and Windsor is $165 a month.
I found that from a customer.
I know, and I'm waiting to hear confirmation because that's so out of line with everything else that I'm like, I want to hear from them. So I've sent them an email, but I haven't heard back. I thought it'd be interesting to just check a couple of other, even though they're not right in Narberth, but Narberth Station, which is just on the other side of North Narberth Avenue on Haverford, so it's in Lower Merion. They don't have a garage. They don't charge for surface lot parking. I was like, wow, okay. Thomas Wynn doesn't charge for outdoor parking. If you want to park indoors and you have a yearly lease, it's $70 a month. If you have a short-term lease, it's $100 a month. So that just gives us a ballpark sense and kind of shows us how, if we did want to somehow incentivize people with that to park, we'd have to have a pretty hefty increase to what we're suggesting as our fees. So, not sure, but it gives us some data to think about.
So, I would like to just state that the off-street market for parking is valued at a range of current,
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, if we want to say indoors, you could say $70 to $165. I mean, it's certainly not. It's a big range. I was like, oof. Assuming that's right. Okay, so we'll come back to multifamily again and revisit that, and we'll revisit some, as I said, some little details around guest passes and that. But I feel like we've got. We've addressed a lot of the big things that we would want to have in our recommendations before we go to council. So, if it's okay with you two, we'll see if Carol Marie has a comment that she'd like to make. Carol Marie, would you like to make a public comment?
Yes, I'm on the road today. I have not been to a parking meeting in a long time, and I'm just kind of aghast at some things that you're saying. If you're saying no overnight parking, I get it if someone's taking advantage of parking and going on vacation, for 2 weeks. But if my daughter wants to come and spend the night, I have to pay $5 for her to spend the night. What happens if I have a party and 2 guests are too drunk to drive home? I've got to call the borough at midnight and say, hey, don't ticket my people. If we're going to make it so only Narberth people can park in Narberth, the way it sounds like we should put gates around the town and have parking stickers or slide carts to get in. I think this is like so over-regulating and such overreach. And then when you're talking about, I own 513 Conway Avenue. It's a 6-unit apartment that was built in the 40s. Since the 40s, everybody's parked on the street. So now you're telling me that each unit, the first floor gets to pay $50, the second floor pays $150, and the third floor pays $300 for a parking permit? I mean, it doesn't, they're each an individual address. It's 513 Conway Avenue, F1, all the way up to F6. So I'm not comprehending why we are changing things that aren't broken. And then you haven't talked about the fee structure. The fee structure is why I came onto the meeting, because it seems as if you are making a class system. That if you are one of the privileged to have a certain type of vehicle, you get a special treatment. But if you're one of the ordinary little people who drives a regular car, you are cast into a different caste system and have to pay double or triple what a person is. And if you have a driveway where your children play and you don't park your car in the driveway because you need a safe place for your kid to play hockey, then you're telling me that I'm going to be paying a driveway tax and paying more for a parking sticker. It just seems that this is the most really governmental, overreaching taxation that you've thought of so far to date.
So,
could we first correct something? And I think
please, because I'm listening and this is what I'm hearing.
So currently there are 2 things in what you said that I wanted to make sure you understood where we had kind of settled on things. Number 1 is with the fees. We had discussed that and kind of settled on that at previous meetings, which is why we didn't rehash it today. But we ultimately, if you're referring to, at one point there had been an idea that electric vehicles might be treated differently for fees and such. The committee ultimately moved away from that recommendation. So all cars, no matter what type of car it is, would be treated the same. The second thing was...
That's good to hear.
Yeah, and the second thing is in the conversation we just had after exploring that idea of a whole multi-family building being on the same sort of structure, like you said. After we talked through that for a couple minutes, we actually moved off of that idea and said, for the exact sort of reasons I think that you just mentioned, we moved off of that idea as well.
Yeah. So each unit within a multifamily dwelling would be treated as its own separate thing. So,
now, if there is no parking lot, if historically since the 40s has been street parking, now we're going to have to pay for parking on the 500 block of Conway Avenue, for example?
if the council decides to have eventually a requirement that to park on the street overnight in places that aren't currently regulated requires a permit, then yes. But we don't know yet. The council will want to do that. We're, as I've said throughout the meeting, putting something together for council to react to based on what came out of the traffic, the parking study, and the parking study task force recommendations. So that's, so, and it'll be up to council to decide then. And then Bob, you wanted to ask Carol Marie a question?
Yeah, Carol Marie, I think that I'm gonna think on your observation about the driveway issue. Definitely think it's a fine point to make. And then the second thing is, do you agree that regulations that do not allow commercial property owners to have residential parking permits, do you think that's a good rule?
I think it's a fabulous rule because the office building at the corner of Sabine has 11 residential parking permits. And
I get it. Thank you. I'm glad you agree with that. I just want to observe for you that that would be a government regulation, okay? Protecting your ability to park on your street. So not all government things are bad.
no, I'm not saying they are, but
Okay,
I'm saying that this is such micromanagement of something that isn't broken. And the parking study is also 7 years old. So a lot has changed in the past 7 years.
I think I agree with you that we're looking at this in sort of a micro way, but we are not yet imposing management of these things.
No.
We're just looking at it, we're talking about it. So there's a difference between talking about it and actually micromanaging. And I really do appreciate your comment about the driveway, and I'm glad you agree with the government regulation on not allowing commercial property owners to have permits.
Yeah.
Well, that seems like an oxymoron to have a commercial building have residential parking permits because they're residential permits.
That's why
But
we
also,
create
as you're
rules.
saying, you haven't implemented this. You're discussing it. But if you don't hear what other people are saying, then you don't know. It's like, to me, having such a high tiered parking fee structure is a burden. And to have my tenants now have to pay for parking that they never had to, that they never needed to because there isn't a problem on the street, that seems like an overreach. Also, it seems like a money grab that the borough's trying to make money off the backs of all of us.
It's a fair point, and people have different points of view on this issue.
Yeah.
Understood?
Yes. So we've reached our usual stopping time that we try to keep to for this meeting because of folks having other commitments. So is there anything else that we want to say other than to mention that we meet again on the second Tuesday of May? And I just realized I don't know what that is.
Sure, that'll be May 10th.
Thank you, May 10th. I forgot to look that up at 8 a.m. So, Carol Marie, thank you for your comments. We really appreciate. We like getting comments in this committee. We have looked at a lot of the ones that have come in through email and addressed them. So thank you very much. All right. Do I need a motion to adjourn, or do I?
You do, yeah.
That's what I was gonna say. Bob.
Okay, I'll move the issue. So what about commercial parking? We're going to discuss it.
That's down the road.
Okay.
We're going to get there. Yes. Okay. Thank you. All in favor? Aye. All right. Thank you. The meeting is adjourned.